Welcome to the Resilient Performance Podcast. This is Keep It Real Talk number 12 with Dr. Trevor Rappa here and myself, Greg Spass. We don't have Doug on this episode this week. We got one question sent in that was pretty thought-provoking. The person wanted us to discuss how we think about integrating new ideas or continuing education into practice. How do we find a balance between experimentation and progressing or progress while keeping our original framework? So how do we try new things without sort of losing all the things that we used to do or we did before, learning something new? Maybe one of you provide, or each of you provide an example of how you've incorporated something new into your thinking or treatment recently.
I think that's an awesome question. I think just the start, I think one of the things that all three of us have always kind of strived for and have always wanted to be like one of our values is just like that idea of like always wanting to learn more and always kind of searching for more. So I don't think any of us have ever thought that we have like all of the answers or that we, can't keep learning, can't continue to learn. I would say that I think I'll speak for myself on this one. Like what kind of con ed I'm more attracted to these days is like way different than when I was like in PT school. Because I really enjoyed like all of the theory and stuff that of the different courses that we used to take, a number of years ago. Because I think that helps me like create a model in my head and have an idea of like what are my weak points, what are the things that I need to learn more, what's going to help me impact my clients. But I think those courses that are initially kind of more on like the theoretical side of things are great initially, but I can tell over the last few years myself, I've really wanted to get more like into the weeds of like practical things, meaning like more coaching related or something more intervention related, whether it's a manual therapy course, whether it's like spending time with Lee Taft and watching him coach athletes, or like we did with Derek Hansen. So I think always being open to learning more and knowing that nobody has all the answers and you can always continue to learn more is something that all of us, take pride in kind of feeling that way. But I think just it's kind of interesting to like reflect back on like how the interests have changed for us and how the courses that we've taken have kind of changed over time.
Yeah, definitely. And I would definitely echo that and say, early on when everything is new, it's really easy to dive in really deep, and you should. And that's how you start to build your framework early on in your career as a student. And we see that with the students that we do take, they are diving in so deep like we did that we almost have to kind of pull them back a little bit, because like you said, you can learn things that are interesting, but in the end, does it change what you do in like a practical standpoint? And that's definitely, like you said, something that we're focused on more so, as the years go by, is like, okay, well, there's this new thing or this new course or this new presenters talking about something different, but is it going to change what I do in the coming weeks? Because if it's not, then it's more just a hobby, right? And I think we've spoken about this before on a different episode, but that's definitely part of the process. And definitely, like, if you have a framework that works, if you're doing stuff that works and it's helping people, then you don't have to stray from it as much. So the longer you practice, the more solid your framework should be. So then you don't have to deviate as much. And then over time, you're just exposed to more and more things, and you decide which sort of tools on your tool belt you want to pick to implement at certain times. That's just based on experience. And yeah, one of the things, what were we going to say?
No, I was gonna say that was just I remember hearing Bill Hartman a long time ago. I don't remember what it was on, but I remember him saying like, and it really has, it's always stuck with me, was like you need to have a foundation in like the basic sciences in biomechanics and in anatomy and in kinesiology and in physics and all these things to be able to actually like have a strong enough foundation so then when you do take in new information you have an appropriate lens and an appropriate filter to kind of like take things in or keep things out from. And I think having that like so that's something for myself I've strived more and more is kind of like really understand like the fundamentals and the basic sciences that like our whole kind of field, whether it's more rehab centric or more performance centric, is really based upon. And I think as we, we hear about new courses and things like that, it helps us understand like when it is useful for us and when it may not and when it may not be as useful for us.
Definitely, yeah. And I feel like more so in the last year or two, we've gone back more and more to the physics and, things like force. What are the forces being applied? And I've said it before, like that seems to be my number one like determining factor whether I'll use and like an X's and O's, like whether I'll use a certain exercise or not, or if I'm loading a certain exercise, is it even enough to give me the forces I'm looking for? And that's more of like, that's going to determine what I decide to use. So that's definitely changed over the last couple of years for sure. And I know that for you for sure, with all the stuff you've dived, dived, is that the word?
Doved.
All the stuff you've
Dove it in.
dived into with with Lee's work and change of direction. And we early on we focused so much on biomechanics, and to the point where you almost sometimes forget about like force application, rate of force development, strength, and you kind of lose those more basic physiological things that if you're not changing those things, you're kind of just waiting for things to change and get better, which is like then why even go to therapy or why work with a trainer, because I could just do nothing and I'll be the same. So that goes back to, again, do no harm. Like we have to apply stress to people to get the adaptation we're looking for. And if we're just focused on strictly, what's happening at this joint and not focused on forces and physics, then we're kind of losing a huge, probably I would say number one thing, because there's a lot of people that haven't heard of the con ed that we've gone into and sort of like gone through the rabbit hole and back, that are doing great things despite not having heard of a 3-letter acronym, con ed model. So they're just doing proper training and loading people and periodizing and monitoring how people are responding and doing all the things that you should do to be effective.
I think, like part of the question to me is like, makes me realize how like fortunate we were to have the different mentors that we've had, like Alan, who we always kind of talk about, to like really kind of bring things back to reality. And, to be a guy like Alan who understands like all the different theories and models and approaches that are kind of going on, but ultimately bringing everything back to like the person that you're working with in front of you. Again, whether it's kind of performers or rehab, it doesn't really matter, but just always trying to come back to like, what is the practicality of the things that you're learning? And is it going to make a difference for, the populations that you work with, whether it's, again, more athlete centric or more just, gen pop type things. And that's something I think when we take on students, I know because it's kind of usually you and I doing most of the substance with us in Jersey, it's always trying to get them back to the idea of like that's all great stuff, but like, what are you going to do? Like, what is that? How does that help the person in front of you? Like, how does that help you give something better to the person in front of you? And I think, like we were just kind of referring to before, it's like the longer we treat and the more people we work with, like ultimately, those are the questions I ask myself when I'm choosing an intervention and when I'm choosing to like learn something. Like, is this going to help me make an impact with the people that I work with? Because if we're, learning things for the sake of learning things, that's great. But I think being able to actually apply that information and keep an open mind and continue to ask questions is vital.
Definitely. And yeah, I think I feel like I do less, like I feel like I do fewer different things and I use a lot of the same things repeatedly because you've tried everything, not everything. I'm sure there's stuff I haven't done with people, but you try everything and you figure out what works and what you like the most and what you're most comfortable coaching with what population you're working with and all that. So that's definitely huge. And yeah, for sure with students, it's great that there's such a high level of interest that we get from our students in the profession and in continuing education and valuing, looking deeper than just what physical therapy school might provide, or for a strength coach further than what your bachelor's might provide or your master's degree. So that's commendable. But yeah, for sure, it's always like, okay, but how does that thing, is that better than what I'm already doing? Maybe it is, but we just have to think about things that way, right?
I think that's why, like, your blog post that you just wrote about kind of like the arm care stuff is such a great example of that. It's like there is a typical traditional
That's the private blog post that you only get if you're on our mailing list.
There you go. Nice.
Which so make sure you're plugging that mailing list, join that thing.
Exactly. But yeah, like the whole idea of like the thrower's 10 that's been around for a long time, and I think it's like you've taken the kind of basic concept of that and applied things that you've learned from other disciplines, like with the contact prep stuff from Andy Ryland, and kind of put your own spin on it, and I think in a lot of ways made it a more holistic approach to kind of what arm care can be, and you're just applying things because of the understanding of like the forces and some of the physics behind it, being able to apply it with a different population and really get some awesome results with that.
Yeah, and I still feel like I'm in that like experimentation mode at this point with it. I'm still kind of playing with it, both with myself and with patients, of course, within, say I'm being safe with it, but for sure, like thrower's 10 is like the ultimate number one arm care thing that everybody's ever heard of, and you learn about it in school, and everybody in the world who plays baseball has a band that they can use to do throwers 10 work, and I don't trash it. I think there's a place for it, but it shouldn't be all year round doing the same things and not be progressed. But that's beyond the scope of this talk right now. But ultimately, it's a piece of the puzzle, and I think more about, like we already spoke about, forces. Like when you're throwing a baseball, it's literally the fastest movement that happens in sports. It's something for some reason, the number 7,000 revolutions per minute, like of your shoulder, is occurring at your shoulder every time you throw, like at least if you're throwing at a high enough level. Maybe those numbers are old or whatever, and I'm not in the know anymore, but like if you're doing that and there's like so much distraction, like over an inch of distraction happening at your shoulder, like the compressive forces that you have to create to react to that distraction, to me, it's like, okay, if that's what's happening, how is this like side-lying 3-pound external rotation with a dumbbell thing, like how is that going to help me? And there is a way that it does. I think it's more related to like neurophysiology, more so, and more of like a recovery type of thing, more so than like I'm getting strong. Like nobody's getting strong doing that. You get strong by lifting weights that are heavy, and strength is relative, but also with speed too. Like you have to load things, but also load them with higher speeds to make them more specific to the activity that you're doing. So, I used to think like battle ropes, like those are dumb. Like you just do those in like a HIIT class to get tired and like sweat. And now I'm like, shit, I was wrong. And I feel like battle ropes, to me, it's a really, you're trying to do it. You could do it slow and just kind of be tired with it. And I still think that might be even better than doing just banded external rotation or internal rotation, whatever. Better is, like, you can't define that right now, but there's definitely a place for battle ropes in my mind, because of the action being, you can make it really fast. You're loading it. Nothing is going to be as fast as throwing. So we're not even trying to be as specific as that. Otherwise you should just go throw and never train. And then you can make it where it's extensive, more so for like a conditioning thing where you're going at a slower velocity, slower intensity, pace, whatever you want to call it, and doing it for a certain amount of time. I've been doing like 3 reps for 10 seconds with 10 seconds rest. I don't know why. You just try this stuff and you see what works, because I'm kind of going back to things that I haven't used in forever. And I never programmed it before. It was just like, oh, I'm just going to do this for 30 seconds until my shoulders are burning and I can't do this anymore because I'm training, I'm working out. And then, and then Andy Ryland, who's a football guy, he's USA
football, yeah.
USA football, yeah.
USA football.
And I think he works a lot with rugby players as well. He's got a whole course on like contact preparation, meaning like physical contact sports, tackling, grappling, all these awesome things that I think need to be considered when you're talking about working with a thrower, who's throwing at some serious velocities, because of, again, forces. And if you're grappling, I almost like, am I going to start having my pitchers grapple with each other? Like, I don't know if, Yeah, I mean, like if you, yeah, and a wrestler is a great like example of someone who I feel like should be really good at throwing, not because they're going to be skilled to throw because they're a wrestler, like they're just a different athlete, but just the amount of time they spend on their hands, the amount of grappling they do, like those shoulders have to be like stable unless they've obviously had an injury and they've been put into all these wacky shoulder, because they're a wrestler, they get put into weird positions that might create instability. But the way that they move for their sport, the way that they train, is probably conducive to a really healthy shoulder for a thrower. So I'm thinking a lot about doing things that, or I'm starting to do more of the things that Andy's taught us, and that this was all from you guys introducing it to me. You were exposed to Andy's work before I was, and then now I'm looking more into a lot of the things that he's doing, and it's a lot of just thinking about it. The like ground-based work is a lot of the stuff I'm adding in. So like everybody does bear crawls, bears, different sorts of things like that, quadruped work. But then it's like, all right, let's take it a step further. Let's make it harder, because like just doing a bear is the same thing to me as like doing a banded thing, whatever. It's not enough. I think there needs to be more. And then going back to the battle ropes, so that would be like a compressive force would be something where you're doing you have your hands on the ground and you're doing some sort of bear variation, kicking your legs out, lifting your hands off the floor, going up and down. It's a whole bunch of different things that you could find on YouTube in contact preparation. There's a whole playlist that's like 40 something videos from these guys. I think they're speaking French in the video, but and they're doing some awesome stuff. I think it's Upside Strength. That's what it's called. If you want to find it. And then that's like a compressive force that you have to deal with at your shoulder, elbow as well, of course. And then I think the battle rope stuff is sort of like that's distraction that you then have to react to and create some compressive forces. So you're reacting to some distraction by using battle ropes. And then I'm thinking like, okay, well, going back to like body blades, like I probably would have trashed body blades 4 or 5 years ago. And now I'm like, I think they're actually pretty good. I feel like I like them a little bit better than something like just a traditional ER hold type of thing you might see that, performance coaches use or physical therapists use with a throwing athlete. So yeah, just kind of rambled a little bit, but that's how I was introduced to it by you guys. And I'm like, this stuff makes a lot of sense because of force and speed and what things are going on for a throwing athlete at their shoulder. And then it's just like I tried a bunch of it myself, and I posted some of it on our Instagram previously. And then it's like, okay, when the time is right with someone in their rehab, because I'm mostly seeing my baseball players are mostly seeing me for rehab purposes. I'm not training necessarily. We're not on like that further end of the continuum, because a lot of them are working with a trainer at the gym we're in. The Annex, I'm wearing their shirt right now. So a lot of the rehab stuff is like when the time is right, when they've done bears long enough, when they've done push-ups from the ground, and they've done some stuff like that. Like, okay, what can we start to do to progress some of their bear work to be more of like a contact prep type thing?
I think that's one of the things that I love so much about just like that progression of things of forces like that, because I think a lot of like the issue we have with some of those like lower level exercises is not necessarily like the exercise itself. Like it's not a sideline 3 pound, external rotation. It's like when somebody can do that all day long and it's not hard for them and it's not stressful. It's like, okay, then we have to provide some other sort of higher level activity to actually create whatever adaptation that we're looking for. So I think being able to have such a long progression like that and to be able to, and I think, having that idea that it's just all we're trying to do is manipulate force in some sort of way, whether how we're applying it, whether how we're making the person react to it, whatever it is, like that makes our progressions pretty much infinite, which I think is really cool. And is one of the reasons why you can get creative without like making it look like a circus trick. Cause I think there's some of those other, there's other things that you'll see online or on the internet that people are doing, like, well, it looks really hard, but like it's harder for the sake of being hard, versus when you go through all those different contact prep bear activities, like you're talking about with these different, opposite arm, opposite foot, like hopping things from an all four position. There's so many of those things that are so incredibly hard and challenging, and Like you said, you're getting compressive forces, you're working on anti-rotation control. You're doing so many good positive things that like kind of start from a much lower level foundation if you're coming off somebody with an injury, but you can eventually should be progressing to activities like that if they're going to try to get back to a high level of sport where, you know, the forces involved and the speed of everything is just so much faster, and you have to be able to like control and do some funky weird things eventually.
Definitely. And that goes back to like, I said it before, like what is arm care? Like people don't really define arm care really well. And to us, it's a more of a, like you said, holistic approach, and it's got to be a total body approach. Like if somebody can't squat or deadlift their body weight like that, that's their arm care. Like they need to be able to do that before they're even worried about throwing a baseball really hard or safely. And then, yeah, like you said, the band work has a place. I think it's, like I said, more recovery. If you're in the off season and you're not throwing, I feel like it's kind of a waste. If you want to do it because you've done it forever, sure. Don't let it take away from something else that you're already doing though. But that's the time, if that's the time of year that you're in, like you should be getting after it in the gym to the point where you're getting what you need, and you don't need to be doing such low level band work. I think band work should be more so in season while you're throwing on your high intensity days after you're done throwing. To me, it's recovery at a certain point, right? But if you're 13 and you've never done any of this stuff, you should probably do it. You should be introduced to it. You should do it somewhat regularly during a throwing season. But you know, you should also be playing other sports. You should be wrestling. You should be playing football or whatever else, basketball, because that's also at that age, that is part of arm care too, just being an athlete.
Right.
So I don't even know, we kind of circumvented the question maybe a little bit, but I think it's to answer it, it's just like constantly trying to find new things, being exposed to different things, and seeing how they fit the physical qualities that we're trying to access or gain from somebody. What are the changes we're trying to make? What type of athlete are we working with? There's a lot of factors in how we decide to integrate something new. I would say it's definitely always by our, like we try stuff with ourselves first before we're never giving something to an athlete that we've never done. There's never a time that doesn't happen. So like I've never Olympic lifted, so I'm not going to do Olympic lifting with my athletes. This is going to get a lot of buzz. People love talking about Olympic lifting on social media. They freaked out when we sent a Instagram post of you with the
with the A bar thing,
whatever. But like if somebody has to Olympic lift, then I'm going to send them to somebody else. So I'll send them to you because you've done that, and then you'll probably send them somewhere else anyway. But yeah, I think that answers that question. And then anything else you want to talk about?
I don't think so. Not right now.
Yeah, we keep this one pretty short. The only other thing is a reminder. So today is Wednesday, the 25th of November, the day before Thanksgiving. We have our Black Friday sale coming up. So we have a new product that we're putting out, a little groin injury reconditioning program is what we're calling it. So the purpose of the program, the way I was kind of describing it to some people, was that in PT school, you have your Cerex classes, you have your rehab classes, you know what to do when it's an acute situation, you know what to do when you have precautions from a surgeon, you respect tissue healing properties in the acute phases, subacute phases, but then if that's all you're doing, then you just have to outsource everything after that. And if you're not outsourcing everything after that, then you're doing a disservice. So this is something that should then be considered towards the middle to late part of quote unquote rehab, where someone needs to get ready to return to their sport, or they're currently with starting their sport or something like that. So that's this focus for this program. It'll be the groin, and we're going to start coming out with more of them for various injuries. It's a full 4-phase program, includes conditioning. It's primarily for like what a field sport athlete should be doing. That's where you see most of, you see a lot of hockey, groins in hockey, but something like soccer, lacrosse, field hockey, sports like that, football, you'll see some groin injuries as well. So that product is going to be free as part of a 3-product bundle where you get the course, you get that growing program, and then you get access to our private exercise database, all for like over 50% off discount or something like that. But either way, we want to get a lot more people involved with what we're doing. We want to develop more online content like this. So we're excited about it, and we hope you guys are as well. So definitely, if you are not on the email list, get on the email list. I'm going to plug that again because we're going to send out notifications about Black Friday, send you a link of where to go. Otherwise, just check out social media, do the whole link in your bio saying whatever to find the Black Friday events, and then that's it for today. Anything else to close it?
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening, and happy Thanksgiving, and enjoy a nice long weekend with your family. We'll see you next time. Bye.
As a thank you for listening, we'd like to offer a 10% discount on all products at resilientperformance.com. Please use promo code PODCAST at checkout. That's PODCAST. And I also encourage you to sign up for our mailing list to receive exclusive articles only available by signing up. Thanks for listening.